great podcast. I'm Satavisa. From Airbnb and Lyft to Slack and Twilio, the world's top startups have been built on AWS, and it's been that way since 2006, when AWS first brought cloud infrastructure to the world. To further enlighten us on this matter, today we have with us Kumara Raghavan, head of AWS Startups India. Hello Kumara, welcome to Analytics Insight. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Satavisa. Pleasure is mine.
Please give us a brief about the services provided by AWS Startups India, like Amazon Personalize, Amazon Forecast, Amazon SageMaker, and others.
Sure. So firstly, I think if we take a step back, there's a huge amount of interest in machine learning today. And it's probably one of the most transformative technologies of our generation. So at AWS, we have over 100,000 customers today that are using a variety of ML use cases from AWS. And one of the things that we see is when you look at how AI/ML is being used, we see three broad categories. First is customers try to enhance the customer experience that they have. So if you take Paytm as an example, they were able to reduce the time that it takes for a KYC process from days to minutes. And at the same time, that also got them to reduce that cost of the process by 75%. The other area where we increasingly see that use is improving operational efficiency. So again, just a brief example, if you look at Policy Bazaar, they use Amazon service called Poly, which allows them to manage huge volumes of customer queries every day. And yet another area is to reduce costs completely. So, and when you look at an organization like Swiggy, so they have metrics which are segmented spatially. So there are different metrics for different cities, areas, and so on. So with a tool like Forecast, they are able to manage their cost per delivery a lot better. So although you see a lot of these trends and increasing usage of machine learning, we are pretty much at the start of the journey. And the way AWS looks at this is to look at the whole offering in three layers. So at the very bottom layer, what we have is a set of infrastructure and frameworks which are commonly used by ML experts and practitioners, particularly advanced developers and data scientists. So these are people who are very comfortable building, tuning, training, deploying, managing models themselves. And so they are quite conversant or happy to work with the chips and the framework kind of level. So that's at one level where we have the advanced level of expertise. The middle layer is essentially what we have as the Amazon SageMaker. It's a fully managed service. And what this does is it removes some of the heavy lifting or complexity that a data scientist or a developer would have to undergo when they build and train their models. So with Amazon SageMaker, what we were able to do is we were the first to build in the reinforcement learning into a service like this. And what we have also done is to build a fully integrated development environment. So what that allows developers to do is to store and collect everything in a single place, whether it's code or notebooks or data sets, or even settings, project folders. So they get to see all of this in a single pane of glass. So it makes it much easier for them to manage and deploy the models that they are planning on. And at the top layer of the stack, is what you would loosely call as AI. And simply because these are services which try to mimic human cognition. And these are a variety of services. So one would be recognition, for example. So it's a feature of deep learning for both video and image analysis. And this has a variety of use cases, as you can imagine. It allows facial recognition at scale. You can even monitor sentiment analysis, looking at the emotions of people on videos, and can also use it for a variety of security use cases. So we see a huge adoption of recognition as one of those services. And then on that theme, we also have several others like Poly, which I mentioned earlier. It's a text-to-speech translation. Amazon Lex, which is for building conversations. And we also have Comprehend, which allows a natural language processing based query so that users can find insights within text. So let's say you have a large annual report and you want to figure out some of the specific summaries within that. So Comprehend allows you to do that, for example. So that's the way we have looked at it from these three layers. And at AWS, we really think that as organizations start scaling, there'll be a use case across all these three layers.
Can you please share with us some of the most interesting use cases and workloads that different startup customers are building and driving on AWS?
Certainly. Now, India, of course, is a growing economy. So the scope for ML and AI is really, really broad. And when we look at our startup landscape, so we see a transformative level of usage. And startups are really solving problems that you didn't think existed before. So that's fairly easy to see when you look at the middle class of India today. But I think the more exciting part is how the startups are today even able to address some of the middle strata of the population. So if you take one of the areas where we see huge changes, it's one of financial inclusion. So we see a number of innovations when it comes to fintech. But if I take the example of CreditB, they are an Indian fintech, and their goal is to ensure that students and even self-employed users who need loans, for example, have easy ability to get the financial needs that they have met in an easy and a secure manner. So they have 4 million users today who access a variety of microloans. It can be as much as, let's say, $2,500, which could be used for a tuition fee or medical expense, even online shopping. So this has allowed their users to go through the process from the first click to getting the amount or the money into their bank account in as low as 15 minutes. Now, that's a significant improvement in terms of access for a set of population that would previously have struggled to get a loan. Now, as CreditB keeps having this success, one of the things that they see is there are also other people who try to take advantage of this. So it's important for them to have a strong security posture. So what they have been able to do is, again, use recognition as one of the services, which allows them to constantly monitor their use cases, use it for KYC, and make sure that all of their customers have a legitimate use case for which they are catering to. So that's from the fintech example. The other one, really, which we are quite excited about, is in the area of food and agriculture. So again, you wouldn't intuitively think of this when we look at all the hype around the modern day city in India, where we are quite inundated with offers like quick commerce, where you get a 10-minute delivery. But when you look at the back end and think of some of the larger impact that food and agriculture can have, one of the things that we see is today all over the world, about $500 billion worth of food is wasted or lost. Now, if you think of it, if you can even save half of this, right? So you could feed 1 billion additional people all over the world, which is a significant potential for improvement and changing the lives of individuals all over the world. So one of the examples that we have is Intello Labs. So they are a startup in the agri-tech area. They've been able to cut down the food produce wastage using AI and computer vision. So Intello Labs uses Amazon Sagemaker. They use that to train their models and do model optimization. What it allows them to do is do all the hyperparameter optimization and train their models in a way where they can run their experiments at scale and deliver significant efficiency. For example, any food produce that needs to be sorted, it requires a much lower manual intervention than it would have had to before. And I'll pick on one more, which is in the education area. So when lockdowns first began in India in early 2020, I think one of the key things we saw was how schools needed to find new ways for their students, not just to facilitate learning, but the other area was also one of testing. So we have this Pune-based edtech company, Vshine Tech. So they are focused on university examination process automation. So what they have been able to do is to build a solution which allows for remote proctoring. So again, they are able to do this with facial recognition using Amazon Recognition. And I think the crucial part in this was they were able to build this within a week. That's the level of impact that they were able to have with the automation that AI/ML can bring for them today. So those are some of the examples that we have been quite excited about, Satavisa.
How do you think leading SaaS unicorns are also driving both internal operational efficiency and customer engagement using AI?
Sure. So I think one area we could look at from both of those perspective is the number of SaaS startups we have had in India. So last year, it would have been very hard for anyone to escape the level of success that startups had here. In fact, all of 2021, I think we had more unicorns come up in India than all of the previous years put together. And one of the areas where we saw the biggest level of growth was the SaaS startups. And this happened with a consequence that when you looked at some of the larger enterprises had an accelerated path for digital transformation, especially with the COVID-19 hitting everyone hard. So one of the things that enterprises started to do was to use a lot more SaaS-based tools, because that gives obvious advantages like flexibility or cost optimization and even the ability to innovate at scale. And when they started taking on many of these SaaS-based offerings, one of the things that they found is all of these SaaS companies are also constantly innovating. They keep adding newer features based on the needs and requirements of their clients. Now, for any particular organization, you seldom need every single feature that a SaaS company can produce. So one of the key things that SaaS companies try to do is to, while they continue innovating, they also want to personalize the experience that their own enterprise customers can tend to have. So one such example that we saw was with MoEngage. MoEngage now offers a intelligent customer engagement solution, and some of their largest clients include organizations like Deutsche Telekom or T-Mobile, even McAfee, Samsung. So those are some names that come to mind in terms of the customers that MoEngage has. Now, all of these businesses engage with customers with very personalized content, and they do that through their preferred channel of notification. So, for example, it could be web banner, it could be email, it could be SMS. Now, when you look at how MoEngage operates, they engage over 350 million users, and this happens across a variety of countries, as many as 35. And they send as many as 1 billion messages of different formats. So when they are doing this, it was important for them to customize their offering to the needs of not just their customers, but their end customers as well. And that's something that they were able to do. The other thing that we have noticed is when it comes to some of these large SaaS-based startups and unicorns, they all had a significant amount of success while they've scaled on their journey on AWS. So you could have companies like Innovacer, and Freshworks is another that comes to mind. So Freshworks is again another interesting use case when you look at what they have been able to achieve internally. So previously they would develop a machine learning model, and it would take them as many as 8 weeks. Now, what they have been able to do with Sagemaker is to cut down that whole training model down to 27 minutes. So that's a phenomenal reduction. So what that's enabled them to do is to experiment at scale. So today they have as many as 33,000 ML models running. And for all of their 11,000 customers, the whole experience is far better than what it used to be prior to the usage of all of these ML-based automation that they were able to bring in. So again, those are a couple of use cases, both one from an internal view and another from an external view of what we see many of these SaaS companies using or using with both AI and ML.
How customers across industries such as BFSI, healthcare, e-commerce, entertainment, education are using AI or ML to innovate and scale?
Sure. So we can take fintech, for example. Again, this, when you look at last year, this was probably one of the biggest areas when it came to investments that came into the country. And here again, we discussed briefly on the kind of impact that fintechs are making across financial inclusion. But there are also broader use cases. So one that we saw was with a startup called Perfios. So they are a fintech startup. And what they do is completely improve the efficiency of a whole KYC process that a bank or any other financial institution will have to institute. So they have been able to use Amazon Textract. What this does is extract text from any form of document. So it's essentially, you can think of it as a OCR++. The big advantage is you can keep the document in any angle, any format. It can have tables. And Textract is able to get all the data out and do it at a huge level of efficiency and accuracy. So what Perfios was able to do with that is to transact as many as 2 million financial documents every single month. right? So it really brought a level of automation and accuracy, which improved the experience for their own end customers who had to do KYCs. So that's one example. The other that comes to mind is e-commerce. Now, when you look at e-commerce, there are so much innovation happening there. But one particularly is in the area of social commerce. Now, we have the scenarios where there are influencers, and those influencers have a set of followers who typically use the recommendation of these individuals to buy the products that they choose to. And one such organization which caters to this requirement is Trell. Now, when you think of this journey that happens, an influencer typically uploads a video of how they have, for example, been using a makeup product, and then it gives a link to how they could purchase that particular product. Now, when this happens at scale, it's easy to imagine the level of abuse that can potentially occur as well. So it was important for Trell to ensure that there is no objectionable content that gets uploaded. There's no hate symbols that's being used. And all of these, mind you, can have regional variations. So it can be very different in one part of our country to another in terms of what is objectionable, what is acceptable, and so on. So to do this at scale, it's almost impossible to do it with just human intervention. So this is where Trell was again able to use recognition, and they were able to monitor all of the use cases where they didn't want any objectionable videos going up on their site. So again, that was a pretty interesting one. Coming to healthcare, so again, healthcare has been an area where so much innovation has happened, and I think there's more to come, particularly with Ayushman Bharat digital mission. But one use case that we saw during the times of COVID was from Cure.ai. Now, this is a healthcare startup, and they've got a ML-based solution called QXR. What this does is this uses X-rays to classify the probability of a patient having COVID. So as opposed to just the traditional RT-PCR tests that you can have, or even the rapid antigen test. So you could use an X-ray and then determine whether a patient has a high, medium, or low risk for having had COVID. And they are able to do this in less than a minute. So which is again a huge improvement over what we traditionally have even today on the testing front. So they were able to build this with data of over 2.5 million radiology scans. And the QXR app can detect problem areas and even abnormalities so that you can then determine the probability of someone having COVID-19. So QXR uses an algorithm which has a compilation of location, size, even the type of abnormality, and then uses all of this together to present the results. So yeah, those are just a few examples of some of the innovations that we see. There are so many interesting ones that constantly occur.
Now I'm interested to know what is your opinion over the large-scale uptake of AI and ML across startups these days?
Yeah, when you look at what lies ahead of us, I think there are at least three broad trends that I can think of. But setting aside technology in terms of what potential this has, I think the first is, to your point, one of access and cost. So today we have a very increasingly data-driven world. So AI and ML is probably a default. Often we find scenarios where AI and ML is the solution, and then you look for what the problem is, which is absolutely the wrong approach. But on the other side, when you look at it, the ease of use has been increasing phenomenally, and that's a growing trend. So what that means is previously where you needed developers with advanced skills on machine learning, and you also needed data scientists. So today, the ability for anyone, even say a business analyst, to come up with an ML model is really the kind of use case that we are seeing. So that's going to be a growing trend. In fact, we announced Sagemaker Canvas, which is a visual code, no code capability that allows a business analyst to build ML models and generate fairly accurate predictions without having to write code or even having ML expertise for that matter. So that's going to be a growing trend. The other thing that we see is a constant lowering of cost, or what you could loosely call as lowering the cost of curiosity. So it's a lot easier to conduct experiments, and that's again an increasingly accepted model, because gone are the days where you had this one individual like a CIO who knew all the answers to every problem that the organization had. So today we live in a world where you constantly experiment, you fail in many of them, which is totally acceptable, and then a few succeed. But in order to follow that model, you got to have really low costs for all these experiments. And at AWS, our philosophy is to constantly reduce prices. So in our history, we have reduced it as many as 111 times till November last year. The other thing that we constantly do is to lower the cost of training. So with our Intel-based Habana Gaudi instances on EC2, so we are able to reduce the training cost by as much as 40% price performance improvement compared to the GPU equivalent models. So that's certainly one trend that we see, access and cost both improving constantly. The other thing we see is a huge amount of adoption when it comes to personalization. So today you see it constantly, whether it's about logging into a streaming device where you expect your streaming platform to give you the right recommendation based on your preference and what you have been used to. The other that we constantly see is areas like automobiles. When you climb into the car, you would prefer to have an experience where the seat and the mirrors and everything else adjusts to your preference and what works best for you. Or even go to a retail app where consumers increasingly expect curated options and very proactive recommendations. So that's definitely on the increase. We see that across a variety of fields. So many companies are taking personalization to the next level. So they are connecting individuals to several vital tools so that all of these users have the information that allows them greater control over the kind of decisions, particularly important decisions that they take in their lives. So yeah, personalization is the second key trend that I see growing. Third one, really at a broader level, is the area of sustainability. So this is a metric which is constantly gaining significance in what we do and how we are all growing. At AWS, we recently added one of the pillars of our well-architected review on sustainability so that customers can measure how they are performing against their goals of being sustainable on the infrastructure front. So we see customers experiment a lot on this front as well. And again, to go back to one of the agri-tech examples. So we have a startup called Cropin. So one of the things they do is to have a vision to maximize per acre value. So they effectively look at increasing the efficiency, improving productivity, and effectively also improving the sustainability across the board. So what Cropin's smart farm does is it totally digitizes farm level processes. So they use a combination of data from satellites, use weather data, and even data from IoT devices so that their agricultural stakeholders can make better decisions. So you can imagine the potential with something like this. So farmers are able to improve their yields. They are able to deliver even better farming outcomes because they are able to identify patterns in the crops, even look at threats like diseases or pest infestation, even plan for irrigation around what's happening based on weather pattern, their current crop. And all of this is vastly better than what you'd be able to do with just your manual interventions and manual experience. So what we see is Smart Farm is really catering to the entire farming ecosystem, covering every practice. So again, phenomenally improving the level of sustainability that you can get in farming today. So yeah, those are some of the trends that we see. Definitely lowered cost, increasing access, more personalization, and a lot of focus on sustainability.
That sounds amazing. I'm sure this is going to definitely help all of our listeners too. Thank you, Kumara, for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you. And I'm looking forward to see many more innovative solutions coming.